Hello, I'm Mihaela from Learn Polymer Clay, and I invite you to make Christmas dangle clay earrings with me. So let's dive into the tutorial. As always, I started by properly conditioning the polymer clay, and I passed through the largest setting of my pasta machine. And as you can see, I've conditioned white polymer clay and red polymer clay, and in fact it's a mixture of true red and Christmas red. And then you'll just have to use a texture plate or an embossing folder to texture the clay, and this is going to be the back of the clay pieces. And then I've used a beautiful Create on Long seal screen, Blooms Around the World is called, and some red acrylic paint, and of course an applicator. And you'll just have to spread the paint on top of the seal screen. You can gently remove the corner of the seal screen, see if you got a beautiful impression, and then lift off the seal screen. You'll have to wash it immediately with warm water and some liquid soap. And then I decided to add some sparkle because I love sparkle, and I've added some embossing glitter, embossing sparkling powder. It's glitter, and you can add more or less. Anyway, you will have a beautiful effect with such embossing snow sparkling effect. And then I use the heat gun to heat set the embossing powder, and I'm just doing this very quickly because I don't want to start curing the polymer clay while using heat like this. Next, I'm going to use the same. Next, you'll have to texture the second block of polymer clay, the red block of polymer clay. Flip it on the other side so you'll have a texture back for your pieces. And I used the same seal screen and the same part of the seal screen, and this time I'm applying white acrylic paint on top of the red polymer clay. At this point my seal screen is slightly damp, so you'll have to use some fabric and dry your seal screen, and you'll have a better definition than my result. But anyway, I found a way to make this seal screen work with what I had in mind. So as you can see, because of the fact that there was water on the seal screen, the central part of the flowers is not defined, but I decided to use a paintbrush and some white acrylic paint and just paint around dot in the middle. So I don't want to do the seal screen again, which I could, of course. And again, don't forget to wash your seal screens immediately after using them with warm water and liquid soap. And I will sprinkle again some glittering embossing powder, and I'm sprinkling this while the paint is still wet. So this embossing powder is going to stick to the acrylic paint. And again, I've used very quickly my my heat gun to heat set the embossing powder. And this will allow me to continue using cutters and making the shape of the pieces that I intend to make using these seal screened designs. So I'm just going to use 2 sizes of petal shaped cutters, and I'm going to cut a smaller clay piece from the white polymer clay stenciled with red acrylic ink, and I will use the larger petal shaped cutter to cut out the second piece of the ring from the red polymer clay sheet seal screened with white acrylic paint. Of course, you'll have to smooth off the edges. For the red sheet of polymer clay, I forgot to use the embossing folder. And then I just flipped the pieces and I used my dotting tool and made a spiral on the back. So in case you forget to texture the pieces at the beginning, which I normally would do, but sometimes I forget. I don't want to distort the front of the earrings, so the easiest way to make a beautiful back for the pieces would be to just use my dotting tool and draw lightly a pattern on the back. I decided to make a little round accents for these earrings. So again, I've used some red polymer clay past on the largest setting of the pasta machine. I used the same embossing folder to make a texture on the back. I flipped the clay and then I used 2 sizes of round camber cutters to cut an accent element that I intend to use for the earrings. Then I baked the pieces for 40 minutes at the temperature recommended by the polymer clay manufacturer, and I tinted them. I let them cool down, and then I've used UV resin to give these pieces a beautiful glass-like look. Of course, you'll have to protect your hands when working with resin, and in case you have drippings on the back of the pieces, normally I put them on top of metal cutters that I can put into the oven. I don't advise you to use your best metal cutters because sometimes you might have resin drippings and you don't want to destroy your favorite cutters. But normally for this kind of pieces, if I go slowly I put a certain amount of resin in the beginning, and then I wait for the resin to level up and spread, and then if necessary I am going to add a little bit more resin, but I do this progressively. And of course I added resin on top of the accent elements I'm going to use for the earrings. And you'll have to use an UV lamp to cure your pieces. I'm curing them for 5 minutes. You should follow the recommendations of the resin and type of resin that you are using. Of course, there are other possibilities. You could use a dimensional gloss, triple gloss, other types of resin. And then I used an electric drilling machine to drill holes. You can use a hand drilling tool as well. And in case you notice that your resin is becoming dull in the areas where you are poking the holes, you can easily fix this. There's a quick fix for this. You can apply a little bit of glossy varnish on top of your pieces, and I would do this to fix my pieces. And then I just used jump rings to put the earring components together. And I used 24 gauge silver color wire to attach a red briolet, and I've made a loop with the round nose pliers, and then I have started a small spiral. I flattened it with the flat nose pliers, then I added the briolet, and I've just wrapped I attached the briolet to the earring component and wrapped the wire around the base. And you have to use your flash cutters to trim off the excess wire. So as you can see, I've mostly used the jump rings to attach all the elements and the earring findings to make this Christmas dangle, sparkling dangle earrings. So I hope that you like this idea, and I hope that you will use it in your work with polymer clay. Please share your impressions with me in the comments below. If you like the resulting pieces, I invite you to subscribe to my channel for more inspiration for work with polymer clay, for tips and tricks and seasonal tutorials to keep you inspired and creative.